Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League. However, there is one team who are very much in the spotlight this week, and I think you know who I'm talking about. It is, of course, Linfield. Dumped out of the Irish Cup by Limavady, fan frustration at an absolute boiling point. This is a team in crisis, isn't it? We ask what has went wrong for the Blues this season. David Healy, he's getting a lot of flack online. Is that fair? What can they do to maybe change things around this season? More importantly, what can they do beyond to potentially go back to challenging again for the title next season, or at least within the next few years? A lot to sink our teeth into there. On top of that, it was a cracking weekend in the Irish Cup. We'll look back on that. We'll also look forward to a double game week in the league. This is going to be a big one. So let's get down to business. It's your latest weekly edition of Kick and Match. I don't think I really need to give any sort of flowery intro. You know what you're here for. You know what we're going to get down to. There's only one place to start in the podcast this week. And today, it's a wonderful combination of not only myself, but Mark McGuiggan. Hello.
Hello, Peter.
And without his partner in crime, it's Ross Welsh.
Hello, Peter, and hello, the people of East Belfast, I'm sure.
And for those who follow this podcast for a while, you know that both those gentlemen are blue-flavoured gentlemen. And it's going to be a bit of a big talking point this week on the podcast. I tweeted on Friday night that when it was 1-0, 20 minutes to go, none of this was surprising that Linfield were losing. It's a weekend where fans are boycotting games away from home. It felt like the players were doing exactly the same on Friday night. This run that's gone on weeks, maybe months now for the Blues took an even deeper turn on Friday night up at the Coleraine Showgrounds. You may be in the League Cup final, but the Irish Cup ain't going to be. And the sentiment when it comes to Linfield, it's not in a good place, Ross.
No, it's in a very bad place, actually. Not a lot of good going on at all around that club at the minute. And Friday, that just sort of sums it all up, whilst also being the death knell for the season, I think.
Can't be that bad.
Let me tell you, it is. It absolutely is. I've almost half written off the League Cup final. On form, I think the Glens are big favourites for that.
Is there a part of you that feels as though getting to the final is great, obviously, for the potential, but also it's maybe even set you up to make it feel even worse because it could be the Glens celebrating
Yeah,
that day if it doesn't go
yeah,
well?
it couldn't happen in a worse way, and I just know what I'm in for if it does happen. So it'll make it even sweeter if we can win, but I've real bad visions of it going the other way.
Mark, when I went online on Friday, I kind of asked Blues fans how they felt, how were they feeling? Did they feel numb to this, or was it another just added frustration to the way this season has been? It's obviously not nice to be booted out of the cup. It's especially not nice if you're Linfield to be booted out by a team in a division lower than you. Now, if we were to rank them, probably this Limavady team is maybe in the top 10 best teams in Irish League football together, so they are pretty much a Premiership team in waiting. But when you went 1-0 down, I didn't see many answers coming up for you.
Listen, it's been a season of failure after failure from the very start of this season. I said on Friday to a couple of people, I wouldn't be surprised if we get beat tonight and everybody's batting it away. Oh, no, you're only talking nonsense. You're only trying to cover yourself. I saw this coming a mile off. The performances from particularly Boxing Day on have been paper and over crack jobs. And we have been second best in a number of games that we've actually won. So not surprised at all, to be honest. Just a total write-off, as Ross said there, of this season. And to be quite honest, I think it's actually done us a favour, save this actually getting beaten by one of the big boys rather heavily, to be quite honest. So that's the way I'm looking at Friday night's game.
When I've watched Linfield recently, and I'm probably talking sometime from November-ish, the word that always stands out to me is lethargy. There's no energy. There's a real lack of pulse throughout this team. And I know to do well, you don't have to play football at a million miles an hour. but there's been so many times where you eventually scrape by, and I know if a team's doing brilliantly, you say that's what great teams do, they scrape by. But there's nothing impressive about this team, what I've seen over the past number of weeks.
Yeah, I just don't know where we're actually heading when you're watching us against the likes of Limavady, who are obviously a part-time team, and even against the other part-time teams in this league. It's often a case where we're actually wondering who the full-time and part-time teams are. I don't actually know what the guys are up to from the day-to-day basis. I don't see any improvement, certainly from where we were last year to now. There's definitely not an improvement there. There's a massive regression, in fact, I would argue. We knew that the loss of Joel Cooper was one that was going to be really a big dent in our team, but I don't think we actually realised how much we relied on a player like him going into the start of this season, and it has shown massively. We have a real lack of creativity. We have a real lack of goals scored, and our defence is an absolute shambles at this stage as well. So it's all piling up to a real nice mess for Healy and the rest of the board at Windsor.
Is maybe the defensive crisis in particular, Ross, is that why this feels like the bottom is just falling out completely from this team?
I don't think it's any one area of the pitch in general. I think it's the whole general malaise about the place. If you ask me, I don't think I wouldn't point to the defence straight away. I mean, you can argue that Fitzpatrick hasn't been scoring, and outside of that, we don't really have a striker that's going. Um, the contract situation, everybody seems to just get a 2-year deal. So then every 2 years around January and February, you have a scramble of half the team are leaving, and we're trying to desperately tie down half the team. You saw it last year with Joel Cooper. You could see that coming. The dogs in the street knew that he was away for a long time, and there seems to have been no contingency planning for it. Obviously, they got Callum Morrison in, and that is just a disaster of a transfer. Looking back now, obviously, um, but it's more the issue for me is you're looking at the whole squad, thinking who's actually going to be left and what sort of recruitment that we're going to have over this summer. Because David Healy's recruitment record is well trodden ground at this point, and he's talking about it's a rebuild period. I have zero faith in him leading a rebuild, and the current board leading a rebuild, to be honest.
So a manager who's won, what, at least 5 league titles, many of them in a row, this is not the type of man that you trust to lead a rebuild. He's been there, done that.
I would argue he hasn't to an extent. His first league win was the first full season he had, and there's the argument that he's inherited a squad there, albeit from Moore Feeney, but we've seen that he couldn't manage at Glentoran either, so maybe he was mismanaging players. He's almost Lauren were on a fallow year last year in that they had all those European games to play. So, he almost I don't want to say he got lucky, but he had beneficial factors going his way. So what you could argue that this squad has needed a rebuild since Lauren won their first league title, and it hasn't come close to happening.
Mark, we have the first mention of Feeney on this podcast, and when I think of that era, I think of you, and I think of how much you disliked that era of Linfield. You saw the upturn since he left. The feeling and the sentiment around the club at the minute, does it feel Feeney era, or are we starting to go below that?
It's certainly, I'd say the mood around the club is certainly that of the end of the season, of Finney's full season in charge. I think we're at that level of rock bottom, to be quite honest. Sentiment wise around the club, feel around the club, squad wise as well. I think we're probably on one of their most expensive on paper squads, with one of the lowest abilities of Linfield teams that I've seen in my whatever how many years supporting Linfield. Probably 19, 20 years supporting Linfield.
You look at this now, and so many of the questions and so much of the commentary is connected to Healy. And we look back over the years, this relationship between him and the fans has usually been frosty at best. I mean, this is the man who on the days that he's winning championships is kind of poking back at fans who criticised him. Does this feel like the temperature is at its peak after Friday night?
For me, this is as close as it's been to a real sort of, animosity. I think Frosty's a good word for what it has been. I think animosity is what this is turning into. There's been a couple of occasions this season, where I've seen Healy shouting at fans and things going on, and you're just going like, what is this actually going to achieve? Um, where does that sit with you as, respect from the manager? I think Healy has sort of lost that respect for the fans. I don't think he ever had it, to be quite honest. But I think the fans,
Why? This is what I struggle to understand. Why? This is a hero of Northern Ireland football who like playing for a lot of big clubs. He's brought trophies. Why isn't he the type of man that came in and deserve respect? What is the type of manager you think Linfield fans are after if it's not someone like him who has the pedigree from a playing point of view and also has done it off the pitch, obviously as a manager, by bringing in trophies to the club?
well, I think as Ross said there, it was a point that I was fairly keen on making. I think the inherited players that Healy had, have won him a number of titles. I think there's this list that goes around every now and again after Linfield lose, two or three in a row, and you're looking at that list of players, and you're struggling to actually pick out maximum of 10 players who have been good players for Linfield Football Club. The strikers in particular that come in seem to not know where the goal is. Defensively, we're signing guys that don't even actually kick a ball. There's names on the list that you can't even remember playing for Linfield. That's the sort of level of signings that we're getting in. When we're looking at players that even the likes of Warren Feeney brought in, they're actually better than some of the ones that Healy's brought in on paper. And you're talking about league titles. So let's just actually have a look at the last 4 years. 1 out of 4 league titles, as Ross said, in a spell where Larne had their eyes on a rather a bigger fish, if we look at it that way. After Friday night's display, 0 out of 4 Irish Cups, zero County Antrim Shields. If you want to worry about that as a big trophy, that's up to you. But zero in the last 4 or 5 years, and 2 out of 4 League Cups. And that was when the League Cup really did it really mean anything, because there was no sort of playoff place and all that. One of those years was against a second tier Portadown as well, and I could almost, if I was a betting man, I would put as much money as I wanted on Glentoran beating us in that final, because his record against Glentoran is absolutely atrocious, and I've never seen a man so scared of Glentoran Football Club than David Healy. To be honest, the performances against Glentoran, and those other, well, it was Glentoran for a long time. The other teams in around the top of us, especially these past sort of year and a half, have been absolutely atrocious. We're actually looking at a Linfield team that have only won at 3 grounds this season: Windsor Park, Clandy and Seaview. That's enough for a man to be sacked, in my opinion.
That's unacceptable. Like that is terrible. Like it can't even beat. I know it wasn't at their ground, but can't beat a championship team away in the cup. It is horrendous, and it's not good enough. Last year, like it was joked about. Like Glens won their trophies by beating Linfield all the time. Never lay a glove on Glentoran until it didn't matter at the end of the season, and that's your bare minimum. Show a bit of fight in what is your biggest games of the season. And Mark's right. He seems to be scared of the bigger teams, and it's you sit and watch it, and you just think, if you have a go, like what happens? Because we're not having a go, and we're getting beat anyway. You know what I mean? Like have a go at them. You're supposed to be the biggest team in the country, and we're scared of Glentoran and Coleraine and Larne.
It's funny you mention that, because that's been a theme, I feel like, in my time doing this podcast, that we're talking about Linfield, and when they go up in the big games, they rarely turn up and take it to the opposition. It's usually take the draws and hope that the other teams falter some way, somehow. There's obviously been examples where they have stepped up and got the big wins, but oftentimes it's those key matchups one on one where you're taking on other top six sides, where they rarely come out smelling of roses. And this year in particular, you're now faltering against teams in the bottom six more than you used to. I think maybe last year, the season before, you would see that Linfield were almost undefeated against bottom six sides, and it was that those games against the better teams where they were usually getting draws. As you pointed out there, particularly away from home, they have been poor, and now it's really coming back to bite them. Like you mentioned that result there against Limavady. I'm looking at some of their other cup games where they played against Newry, PIL, had a game against Welders. Did they play Queens as well this year? None of them, like, they eventually won those games, but Newry ran them close, and at Welders game, the final score looks like they did pretty well, but that was close, and they were conceding lots of goals as well. It's against everybody they're struggling against.
Yeah, it's across the board. And you look at even if we're going back as far in David Healy's reign, David Healy has been Linfield manager for two of Linfield's very, very worst Irish Cup shocks. Now, barring when you go back 50 years to the loss against Carrick Rangers in the Cup final, or I think that whatever 50 years that was, we're talking Queen's University and Limavady United. They are two of the biggest Irish Cup shocks in history, not just for Linfield, across the board.
Do you rank it that highly, the Limavady one?
It's certainly second best. Queens was like rock bottom, but like this is a very, very close second. It's more, see, to be honest, Peter, it's more the fact that we didn't even look like trying against Limavady. We didn't even look like we were going to turn it around. Just so many, the word that was used earlier, lethargic performances from players who, let's be honest, they don't actually want to be at Linfield next year. We're talking about players like Chris McKee, Charlie Allen coming off the bench, who have already committed their future to other clubs, and that's who Linfield are relying on.
Reportedly
in quotation marks. Let's just put that out there. It's reportedly, yes. They've committed their future to another club, reportedly, for the next 2 or 3 seasons. And when was the last time you heard of young players, especially of that age, from Northern Ireland, who are supposedly Linfield fans and all that jazz, choosing Ballymena United over Linfield? It shouldn't happen, but it's happening, and that is the level of where we're at with this club at the minute.
Well, we're talking
Linfield players are choosing Ballymena United over Linfield.
Well, you might argue those players, they weren't starting week in and week out. Do Linfield want them going into next year? If this team's so poor and you need a rebuild, a part of the rebuild is saying thanks for all of your efforts, fellas, but we're going to try elsewhere. Like, what if we're to look at the game in particular? You did have your chances. Some big saves from Gallagher, particularly late on for Limavady. There was, of course, the penalty miss. Like, you could argue when it rains it pours. Everything was not going well. And then, of course, the goal that Limavady score. What's Chris Jones doing?
Boycotting being a goalkeeper. Yeah, no, not great. Not great all round, to be honest.
But you say there was particularly saves at the very end. It shouldn't have to be forcing chances at the end, and shouldn't be waiting to the end of games to turn it on, which has been the story several times this year. Like 2-0 down to rock bottom Glenavon, and then you start playing. And it's like, well, what's the point of that? Like, showing that, oh, we tried. It's like, well, no, because you were outclassed for 3/4 at least of a game, as has been the case, and then you start trying to play nice football going for it. It's like, well, what's the point of that? Like, and he's probably fooled people up to a point, but I think now Friday night was the most united I've seen the fan base on social media, in that his time sorted up, and he's not fooling anyone anymore.
I think a part of this conversation, like when you're not doing very well at a club like Linfield, you're going to get heat. This is not just a Healy thing. It's the raw numbers and the performances have been there. You're going to get heat. But there's two elements of this conversation. One, I think it's the key one, is recruitment and how much it's on him. It's hard to really decipher. But the other side is then, what is he bringing as a manager? X's and O's, motivation. What's he bringing? And I know a part of that on the pitch is going to be maybe he doesn't have the players to get the level and the standards that's required to be where Linfield want to be. And we're not just talking about Friday night there. What I have seen from an outsider is a team who really struggled to connect up, are making big mistakes at the back, perhaps lack of leaders, and you can maybe put that down to injuries. But the players that they're bringing on from the bench isn't making a difference. And then if you're going to be completely reflective and look back at even last year, you might argue that actually if without Joel Cooper, they wouldn't have gotten some of the results that they have. they're not an exciting team to watch, and when they're not grinding out results, this is where all these questions are going to come from. You're thinking, well, what is going on? What is being set out there, put out there? Are any of you guys seeing it that they're trying this, but it's not going well?
I'll no.
No, no. Like it's if you're having like a rebuild year and you can see it building to something, then fair enough. But for next season, you couldn't see anything different to what's happening now from top to bottom in the club. Like there doesn't seem to be any forward planning or anything in the here and now to correct what's happening. So the whole thing just seems rotten.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. I don't actually see where we're going, and I would actually be close to being of an opinion that we need to almost write next season off as another rebuild season. This season has been an utter car crash, and it needs ripped out from the roots and rebuilt. We are miles away. We are probably three, four, five teams ahead of us. That's probably what we're looking at this stage. To be honest, financially, we're at least fourth or fifth in that league. Where we're looking at, player pool is virtually zero to Linfield at the minute. Who would want to come to that club at the minute? Finance wise, if we don't get Europe, we are in bother. I would suggest we are really looking down the barrel of a very, very long sort of I don't want to say like 5 year period of just austerity almost, but like we are in trouble if we do not get European football this season, and I don't see where that's coming from, to be honest.
Well, the whole season's now riding on a European playoff
In February,
because we're not coming second. And would you back? So one of Coleraine or Glentoran is probably going to be in that European playoff. Even to an extent, Dungannon. Would you back Linfield against any of them teams in a big final to show up and win when there's stuff on the line and players have to show a bit of bottle? Because I wouldn't.
we saw the last time Linfield were in the playoffs where the bottle actually lay, and that was 2-0 up against Glentoran at home and losing 4-2. So that's David Healy's proof of when the going gets tough, the bottle goes. To be honest, in big finals, the finals that Linfield have won recently were an absolute terrible game for Coleraine in the 2017 Irish Cup. Absolutely thumped Coleraine that day. Andy Waterworth, like where would we have been without him that season? Cliftonville again 1-0 up against the Cliftonville side who were on the ropes first half, end up losing 3-1 to the proverbial team that could never ever win an Irish Cup. You're then looking at 2 wins in a League Cup. It is what it is, as I said earlier. So where's David Healy's proof that he can win finals? Two out of two major ones in the League Cup and an Irish Cup from almost 10 years ago. That's what we're looking at the minute.
If, for example, I don't think it is going to be the case, but if, for example, his tenure was to end right now, where will have been the high point, and what do you think was behind the success of him? Like, if we're looking like this as a relationship, okay, and you gotta go, well, why are we together? What really were the high moments? What was the secret behind the success which Healy has had, and he could have again in the future? What would you put that down to?
The high points have been the league wins, obviously. One that stands out for me is when we looked out of it, Crews were going for three in a row, and then we turned it around the last few weeks. But that was Crusaders let that go, and Andy Waterworth sort of put the team on his back, 2 hat-tricks in 2 weeks to win a double. Same sort of thing, but you swap Andy Waterworth for Joel Cooper for the later league titles. So, you know, what has Healy been responsible for? Because that anyone could decide to sign Joel Cooper. You know what I mean? That was a no-brainer when he was coming back, and Andy Waterworth was already there. So that just goes to show again.
Actually, I've brought up because he came manager of Linfield in October 15. So I've went back and looked at the squad back in 15-16, and yeah, like Roy Cowell was there, but some of the players that became real stalwarts of some parts of the Healy era. You've got Stafford there, Hockey there, Callagher there, Ward, Matthew Clark, Niall Quinn. You had Stephen Laurie. You would have him in the team now based on how he played on Friday. He was excellent. We will get how good you were, Limavady, at times as well. Fallon's there, Mulgrew obviously there, Miller. Maybe up top isn't as thrilling. Smith was there as well as Waterworth, names of notes. So if and you've kind of put out this theory that a lot of the backbone of the first half of his decade in charge of Linfield was built upon the foundations of a previous team. I can see where there is arguments there. I'm not saying it's 100% true. I'm just saying I can understand where you're coming from.
The bulk of that team was then the team when we went on that European run that ended against Karabag. It's not like he brought in players and improved that team. Like the names you're saying there stuck around for a long time and carried that team. And even, that European run was on the back of Shane Lavery. There's your big name for that period. So it seems he depends on a player to pull him out of holes regularly.
It's not unique to him, like that.
No,
Many.
of course it's not. Of course it's not. But you'd like to see him not do that once or twice. But you can see when he doesn't have it, when that player's not there, then there's not a lot on offer.
We can then look at dividing up the Healy era into the first 5 years up. I know the investment started a wee bit before this, but up to 2020 and then beyond, and how really the ascension of Larne as that project really finally started to bear fruit, and now Coleraine and Glentoran, as much as they haven't had really success in their investment era, they've been there and thereabouts for it. And I think what's standing out to some fans is that, particularly since Larne have become the real big boys, and now Coleraine and Glentoran have found footing again, it is that actually Linfield are struggling to compete. And they won a title last season, but a lot of teams, for a variety of reasons, had kind of fallen off a cliff or were struggling. And you mentioned it there, Mark. Like, I've had a very similar conversation of this season's kind of done. They still need to get Europe and then build for next year. But if I'm to bring in my own personal opinion to this, I would agree that I think next season's a write-off when it comes to actually winning the title. They might have a bit of a fight for it, but there is so much changeover that looks likely to happen in this team, and the fact that Larne looked set up for next year already. Coleraine are pretty much already at a running start, ready to go for it in August based on what they did in January. Yes, Linfield could turn around 10 players into this first 15, first 20, but we've never seen that work, have we? It's going to take a year of work.
I've got this list in front of me from what I can work out. So we're talking this is the players that Linfield have signed up and ready for next season. One goalkeeper and Chris Johns. David Walsh has reportedly, quote unquote, signed for another Irish League team. Let's put that out there. We've got two left backs in Dane McCulloch and Ryan Mackay. We've got two right backs in Ethan McGee and Sean Brown. Two centre backs at a club that is going to play a minimum of, let's be quite honest, 50 games next season. In and around 50 games, two centre halves, and Ben Hall and Dara Leahy. Chris Shields will be returning from an injury. So how does that look? How does, a post sort of major injury Chris Shields look? Three centre midfielders and Frizzell, McLean and Bird. A right winger in Kirk Miller. No left wingers. Fitzpatrick, Offord and a returning Reece Allen. That's Linfield's guaranteed squad for next season. We have so many players going out of contract or returning to their parent club, and we've got three players, all three have really already been mentioned, that will be going out to another club already. The likes of Mulgrew and stuff you might get another year. What are we actually going to find out from that? What's that actually going to achieve for for Mulgrew or Linfield? Let's be quite honest. The guy has been an absolute saint for us over the past 20 years, but I think we're actually hurting him and damaging his reputation by relying on him so much 20 years down the line. That's a squad that might struggle for top six. That's what we're looking at for next season. And I don't know where they're going to actually find the solutions to these problems and plugs to fill these gaps, to be quite honest, because you're going to need another three centre halves. Let's be honest. You need five centre halves because without doubt you're going to have one injured, one suspended at some stage of the season, and then you're down to three centre halves. So two centre halves going into next season is not good enough at all.
I don't think it could be that bad, but you add in the fact that Glentoran are sitting up quite pretty. Lauren and Coleraine we've talked about really investing heavily and are finding their footing again. You add in Ballymena, are they gonna click again, or at least they'll be there and thereabouts to kind of nip at the heels of the top six if it clicks. Let's just say that project hasn't yet clicked in 2.5, 3 years. Could Cliftonville bounce back with investment? And we'll get round to that news. It all just feels like Linfield, who we talk about all the time on this podcast, should be champions or bust every year, are having to make some really tough decisions. And it is a new era because we've seen with the shift towards full-time football for some of these teams and big fees being paid and even just overall recruitment. And we do need to focus in a bit more about where the recruitment has went wrong and maybe lessons that can be learned where it's went right for Linfield and other teams. The reason why Linfield are doing so poorly this year, you may say a bit of how they're set up by management, but also the players that brought in aren't at the level that you need to be. And you can see that from the fact that, well, other teams in the league are looking and reportedly taking away on these contracts, but Linfield aren't going, we need to really back and keep these fellas around.
Well, Chris McKee was one player who then every Linfield fan was a lot of Linfield fans were going, oh, we need to keep this guy. This is a guy that would, for the future and all this. What's he actually brought from? What's he done to justify another 2 year contract? I don't see enough there from that player to say, yeah, another 2 years is what you deserve. Charlie Allen's the same, to be quite honest. I think they're two decent players, but they haven't done enough for me to secure another 2 year deal. I don't think we can actually fault the club for that. I think we're better letting players go if they haven't actually done anything to justify another 2 year deal, because then you're stuck in this cycle of we're sitting on a podcast in 2028 discussing why they're still at Linfield and what they've done for another 2 years. Um, it's nearly diabolical the state that we're in at the minute, to be quite honest, when it comes to the players that we've got left and those who are actually signing for Linfield are players, to be quite honest, that was anybody else sniffing around Dar Leahy, I don't really know. But for me, if a player who is of such a high quality became a free agent in November, he would have been signed up the week after. Linfield were signing him in the middle of January. That's the way I look at that anyway.
Yeah, I feel like, unfortunately, McKee and Charlie Allen are the players that are getting, and Morrison, but he's already been, well, we'll have a box with Cal Morrison in it, and we look back at his Linfield career, there's a big stamp saying, didn't work out, failure. And players like Allen and McKee have been what Linfield, that style of player, they've been bringing in from outside the Irish League, young, where they're hoping they're going to develop them and going to bring them in, and they're going to be the next Shane Lavery type player. That's a massive bar they have to reach. But is that where the frustration is, in particular when it comes to the fans and the people bringing in and the development that Healy does, is that they're either getting the players they're bringing in from England and Scotland wrong, or the fact that they're coming in and the development isn't there?
It's a bit of both because the ponds that Linfield should be fishing in, other teams are doing it so much better. Like Coleraine have only had money 2 or 3 windows now, and they're bringing in names where you just thought, yeah, that's a no brainer. Even the likes of like Lauren and Crusaders are having real joy in Scotland, and somehow the one time we've decided to go big and spend money in Scotland, it's been a complete flop. So you wonder what the recruitment side of things is doing at the club and how they're getting it so wrong consistently, and then why hasn't there been a change? Because you look at that record, and it's not a record I don't think anyone can stand over and say, oh well, at least there was this, or at least there was this. It was like, Kieran Offord, who everybody was going for last year, was a success. And it's like the ones that they're getting right are absolute barn door no brainers anybody could have picked. But then they're, there's not a lot to show for it outside of that. And then when they get there, Kieran Offord is at times looks like he was being played out of position, like he was being coached to not do what he was so good at last year, and that's obviously a source of frustration as well.
You're hitting on something here where, well, you might argue other teams are doing it better for whatever reason, and you could argue maybe with the Crews, why is a player like Bryden, I don't know if he really would be a week in week out starter for Linfield, but why is he going to the Crews? They've almost discovered another Offord. Linfield are there having to pay top dollar for an Offord when maybe they could have snapped him on the way in better. You then look at the League of Ireland, and I do feel as though perhaps Linfield aren't, or they want to, from a stability point of view, pay the type of wages. Like all the wages you're hearing from, particularly Korean, are quite high. They at least what the whispers are, and I understand where Linfield like, oh, we're not going to pay that, but they didn't throw out the cash for Lee Bonus, and he became this big success. And then maybe Linfield go, oh, well, what we need to do is spend a big whack of money on a player within the Irish League who's young and a striker who can move on. And they've got Offord, and I know he's been injured, but it's like they aren't the ones making the right moves, the bold moves. They're kind of looking at other teams who are successful and copying their homework a wee bit.
Well, that's how Linfield was run, like at their pomp. It's clearly the best team in the league. Any other team's best player, oh, we'll have you. And it's carried on like that. And that obviously doesn't work because we're now not the top dogs in the league anymore. So, why would a player pick Linfield over Larne or over Coleraine? And the list of reasons is now dwindlingly short. So there's still too much of the attitude in the club that we're Linfield, it's a privilege to come and play here, because clearly that's not the case anymore. The head of recruitment basically has his own seat at Windsor Park. He doesn't go to any other matches. So there's not a lot of scouting going on there. Like it's it's your job to go and find new players, and he's not. You know what I mean? Clearly. So there's still the attitude lingering that, oh, the best players in the Irish League will just come to us. And it's been shown over the last, it goes back as far as Davy McDade, was that the bulk of 10 years ago, chose to go to Larne instead of Linfield. And that should have been a wake up call, but it hasn't been. And now there's at least three teams more desirable to go to in this league than Linfield, I think.
I think where we're going on that about copying other people's homework. I think they offered one. Like Linfield just needed to hand a blank check to whoever the scout at Crusaders was, because the scouting was done by him, and he scored a bag full of goals for 6 months for the Crews, and then basically went back to St. Mirren, packed his bags, and moved to Linfield full time. So we we're looking at this list of players, and you're pulling names out of the hat, to be honest, that are just an absolute joke. To be honest, that should have never ever played for Linfield, but we were supposedly, told that they were good enough. We signed Kyle Lafferty, like, to win a league title, a player who had actually never played in the Irish League, and we thought, hang on, that'll be our fix. We're looking at, total failures of players for Linfield. I think there's so much when it comes to signing players where you need to do a background check on who they actually are off the football pitch. Number one is your football, of course, but two and three needs to be, what are these guys like off the pitch? And we're also talking about Morrison, who really had an attitude of, I don't really want to be in Northern Ireland. So why were we throwing potentially six figures at a player who didn't want to be in Northern Ireland? That there needs to be big questions asked as to why that was even thought of.
You bring up Lafferty there. What stands out to me when I think of Lafferty and Linfield was his criticism that behind the scenes they were not very well run. Do those comments, they were ridiculed at the time, but seeing just the bad vibes that are just emanating from behind the scenes at the club between and I don't know what's going on between the board and David Healy, is there any credence starting to creep in regards to those comments that perhaps they aren't particularly a well-oiled machine behind the scenes, both in recruitment and just how they do their full-time setup, which seems to be constantly on the rocks financially.
Well, if you've enough time in your day and you're sad enough, you can scroll back on my Twitter, and see exactly what I thought about Kyle Lafferty's comments. I didn't disagree with Kyle Lafferty's comments, but I pointed out that the signing of Kyle Lafferty was enough proof that Linfield hadn't a clue what they were doing. Um, Anybody in their right mind knew that that was not going to work out, and it was going to end up in absolute tears. I lost my head. There was one time at the Oval where I totally lost my head at him, and a guy turned around. He's trying his best. I'm going, what do you want? I can't have somebody trying their best and we're losing it against the Glens. It's just not good enough. That's the sort of thing that we were doing, and just throwing money against the wall and hoping something would stick. That's the transfer policy at Linfield. We'll throw something at the wall and hope it sticks. Your point on the board and what they think of David Healy, they handed David Healy a year extension. So he has another 2 years of this at a large wage, which we can't afford to sack him from. That's what the board think of David Healy.
I feel it's been a general drip, but Friday night was very much a cold glass of water into the face of fans. I think it's a sobering, and it's a summary of all the sentiment that you guys have brought to the table here today, that you're in a situation where financially, and I don't know the books, you don't seem to be a club that either want to or can compete at a level where you're just pushing the other teams in the Irish League out of the way and going, here's the money, come be a star man for us. You're concerned that perhaps even if they could do that, recent history proves that they are not getting the recruitment right in regards to that. You then take on the pitch, even if you did get those players, are they going to be crafted well enough, and are they going to even provide the entertainment and the ability to get over the line and win the league? You're questioning that, and I think it all comes together where a lot of Blues fans are realising that something really needs to change. And I think there's a strong comparison to this other club, and I hate talking about leagues outside of our own because I think it'd be a false comparison, but there is a creeping feeling that you're now Manchester United, where you were the big dogs, you had all the financial might, you have other contenders rising up through the ranks, and when you don't have that ability to just nitpick all the best players and be that legacy club where you are being competed with when it comes to financials, you are going to have to try and be savvy, and you're concerned that currently the setup there within Linfield aren't able to be that savviness. And we've seen the past, whatever it is, decade and a half, which Manchester United have gone through. I've seen senior people who have been at Linfield use that analogy. Does that feel right, Ross?
Yeah, that's spot on. In that United obviously commercialized at the right time, and were streets ahead of everyone. Linfield could have went full time at an early enough point where they're the only full time in the only full time team in the league. They should have got investment in, capitalized on being the biggest team in the league, probably the island, and really went from there. But they've rested on their laurels and they haven't. There was a world where if Linfield's board had got it right, no team should have come close to ever winning an Irish League again. It should have been like a TNS situation in Wales, where they're just so far ahead. They're getting into Europe consistently. It's a it's a farce that Linfield were not the first Irish League team to progress through a European qualification stage, and the fact that Lauren did it early enough into their sort of investment era is a real black mark on the whole club of Linfield, because how was that let to happen? And yes, you got very close, but again, there's a big game where 2-0 up in the first leg, threw it away against RFS, and then threw it away at the very end, um, with that own goal. So that goes to show the bottle of the club as well. But there was a point where it could have been Linfield's league, it could have been Linfield's island, and now you wouldn't back Linfield against most of the League of Ireland's top division. and that's a sad state of affairs as well. But yeah, they had the chance. They were so far ahead, and then similar to United, it's now just all gone to pot. And you see how long United's taken to get back. You're looking down the barrel of a similar thing for Linfield.
I think even when you compare it to um, League of Ireland, we'll note on this, if this is something else I've written down, that was this is one of David Healy's records. David Healy holds the record for the heaviest ever defeat but for Linfield against the League of Ireland team. 6-0 loss down at Dundalk in one of the worst nights of football I've ever watched. We're also talking about it, David Healy, who lost 3 out of 4 fixtures with one home draw against the third best team down south. That's where we're at right now. And Ross is so right. We had pre-COVID, if we had strengthened the arm, we would have been able to hold off anything coming at us. But instead, we just let it sort of, we'll just keep going the way we're going. It's fine, it's fine. And then all of a sudden, it's not fine. Well, look at you. You also pointed out that it's been a general drip. I think I got an absolute soaking in December from this trip. We got 4 points out of a potential 15 in December. And I would actually argue that Friday night wasn't one of our worst performances of the season. We've had worse performances than that. The game in August against Vikinger from the Faroes away from home was dross. One of the worst performances I've ever seen from any football team. And that was where we're at. The fourth best team in the Faroe Islands were beating Linfield 2-1 in a stadium that wasn't even their own. That's where we're at right now. We are miles and miles off.
I'm going to say this. Mistakes can be made. You can go down a path and sometimes you aren't able to completely divert away from that instantly. And I think when we look at the way this season's going to go, Linfield are caught between trying to finish the job and get into Europe, whilst also knowing that realistically they cannot turn this ship around for next year until they get into the summer. And key players have been nailed down. Am I right? McGee has got a contract now with the Blues. Everybody I'm talking to thinks he is going to be the central focus of the new era at Linfield. And you can see people look back and go, you look at the other teams in the league, and Corrian have Cooper, Glentoran have Stewart, and Lauren have Rowan Ferguson, and it highlights, look, you're going to see players leave that flourish elsewhere. So I'm very confident that people within Linfield, and I'm including Healy in this, know that this is not right and they want to get at it. They can't do it instantly and try and turn things around from getting the players in. What do you guys feel is the right way to do it, and what way do you think Linfield will do it to try and steady the ship and return to being not only a title challenger but a title winner within the next 3 years? The title challenge this year, it's over, right? It's gone. It was done before Christmas. Do you see them going back to trying to, because you're going to have to pay a bit of money for this, picking out some of the better players in the Irish League? I think you might argue that some of them have already been taken away from January and last year, and the new crop are still only setting themselves up or betting themselves in. Is it they're just going to have to get these players coming back from underage football within the Premiership and the Championship? Are they going to have to get that right in Scotland as well? Or do you think we're going to see a totally different vibe, and Linfield are going to be big spenders again? I say again, since when? We saw a bit of that in January and we thought, wow, Morrison, money. Offered money. Have they decided they need to do this? It's hard to pick out, isn't it?
I genuinely think we're at a stage where you either commit to full-time football fully, or you accept the fact that it hasn't worked out. Has it worked out for Linfield right now? Absolutely not. I think it's a back to the, as in, blank canvas job is where we need to be at. But I'm in opinion that we can't even afford a blank canvas. That's where we're at, to be quite honest.
Is a binning of full-time football, and it might have to be for financial reasons, that could set back the club 10 years. In fact, it could set it back forever. That may seem over the top, but you know what I'm saying here. If they drop back and Glentoran, Coleraine and Larne push forward, and you got to say Larne is seen to be streaks ahead when it comes to how they do full-time football, how they've become a real academy team. And I know that comes from investment, right? You can't compare yourselves with the Joneses. And Linfield have an excellent academy and have always been able to draw on players, and that really does bring in money. But the way the Blues are at the minute, if they were to lose full-time football, you could really see them drift.
But I'd rather Linfield drop back from full-time football, admit it was a failure, and still exist in 10 years, rather than throw X amount of pound at the wall and you're not about at all. Do you know what I mean? That's where I think we actually need to be sensible in the fact that that hasn't worked out. You admit it hasn't worked out and go back to the drawing board, as opposed to continuing firing money and money and money that doesn't exist at a club that won't actually be fixed for a very long time. I've genuinely am an opinion that you're saying about the next 3 years. It's 5 years potentially until we're back to where we actually need to be. Minimum of 5 years before this is actually fixed, because Lauren did it right. The Glens are beginning to get it right. Coleraine, I don't know how long that lasts. I don't know how bottomless the bottomless pit of money is, and nobody knows that. Nobody knows what that looks like. So for us to be sustainable, for us to be sensible, it needs to either be committed to it or just draw back. There's no point in doing full-time football half, if you know what I mean. You need to be there. You need to be doing what Larne are doing, and Linfield just aren't doing that.
I'd argue what's the difference at this point if we go back to part-time, because the difference seems to be we're full-time in name and we're paying full-time wages, but nothing else has changed. Like, it's we haven't went down the long route of building the infrastructure first to then deal with it. Just I don't know. I don't think it makes much of a difference at this point, because we're shopping in the same pool of players anyway. We're trying to pick the best part-time players at this point and bring them full-time. So I don't see there being much difference.
And you're seeing actually part-time players, if the rumor and innuendo's true, they're getting such eye-watering wages that Linfield aren't even going to compete with them, regardless if they're full-time or they're part-time. It doesn't really matter. So I think the answer bit of the question there about do they go, like, do they spend big, do they take in youth, do they try and bed in a few more Irish League players? I think the answer is all three. But again, they're going to have to be even more savvier than those other teams to pick out an Ethan McGee, bring him in and make him a player. Because by the time you have someone like Ben Wiley, who's, for example, Portadown's best player, all the other teams are gonna want them. It's gonna be more Sean Brown's. So, like, they have had success stories, right? They were able to win out and get Fitzpatrick when other teams were looking at him. So, and I'm sure other teams would take him now. It's about that being the case, and who's gonna be the person picking all that. They are really gonna be maybe the biggest story going into the summer. I think we've been circling this question the entire podcast around Healy and how long will he be with Linfield. There's questions in papers around saying that he is under pressure and could he lose his job. I just don't see that happening. I don't think he's going to leave unless there's an excellent opportunity that pops up.
No, neither do I.
And based on the way this season's gone, is that going to pop up outside of the Irish League next year? Potentially. And I then look at the board and think, I don't know if they're in a position where they can say it's time to go, and if they do, the financial cost that brings, we should, whatever the scenario is, Healy moves on tomorrow, for example, to take on a good job and everybody's happy, right? Who would you guys want? Because the chat seems to be it would be an internal appointment. That's what I've been told for years, that there's people internally who would come in. How would you feel about that if that was the case?
I think Healy's in probably the most secure job in Irish League football at the minute, despite what's actually going on. David Healy holds all the cards for his own job. He knows that we're not in a shape to sack him, and he knows that if he leaves, he's going to get another job. So the only man that'll sack David Healy is David Healy himself, and that's where we're at the minute. David Healy leaves Linfield in 2.5 years, to be honest, and then we appoint either Michael Galt or Jamie Mulgrew. That will be what will happen. and that is currently where I see us going. That's the road we're going down. It's similar to what we saw up at Seaview in the fact that Cadell comes in and replaces Baxter after all those years. Don't think it's the worst idea we've ever had. I think it's better than appointing Warren Feeney, like we did when the last sort of dynasty, the David dynasty, finished it off. But that's where we're at the minute, to be quite honest.
So the idea of a recruiter or someone that's an excellent coach, I'm sticking Magilton and I'm sticking Macquarie's names in here. They don't appeal.
It's not that they don't appeal; they we can't afford one of those. That's not an option. We go.
Why would they come?
Yeah, what's
You
the
know,
bill to Linfield for either of those guys?
complete poison chalice, this job. So
Who would you like to build this team around then, going into next year? Um, it feels like it's McGee. The strange thing with McGee is where's his best position? Is he like your right back forever, right wing back? Do you make him the next Mulgrew? Like, it feels like the things he does well is all in tight spaces. And I've seen some excellent games from him, but his ability to have utility is becoming a weakness for him to really power on. There was a times maybe a season and a half ago I thought he's not going to last in this league. He's going to be gone. He's gonna find a club, and now it seems to have stalled a wee bit because he isn't the main man in one position.
I've heard it's been mentioned to me, and I thought it was fantastic thought. Is he the replacement for Chris Shields in that sort of number six role? I can't see why not, to be honest. He has all the ability to do what Chris Shields does, mop up those sort of nasty wee areas, as you say, in those tight wee spaces. He's got to turn a pace on him. And without doubt, he's probably going to be a future captain of Linfield. That's where we're at the minute. Between him and Offord, I think those are two very, very good players to build a team around.
Who else for you, Ross? Do you personally want to be the future Linfield? And they don't have to be at the club right now.
I mean, who do you even try to get to fix this? Realistically, the future of the club is probably some boy playing in Scotland at the minute that we don't know about, or down south that we don't know about. That's what it should be, because the pool of talent in the Irish League is either already swept up by Lauren and Coleraine, or they're probably not good enough to play for Linfield. Um, Realistically, it is them two we talked about, and then the problem with that is there's nine other boys to fill there, and as Mark said earlier, it's not like we're spoiled for choice going in the next season in terms of options. So it all points towards next year being a write off, doesn't it? And that just out of it has to be. Like, it's not a planned rebuild, it's just it has to be at this point.
Would fans feel irked or be frustrated with the idea if we were to see quite a significant shift in Linfield, where pretty much they go round and they pick up a lot of undercooked players that have potential, who some could become stars and some maybe not live up to the potential you want to be? Would that be a weird scenario where you have Mulgrew, Shields, whoever's still at the back, Johns, McGee, and Fitzpatrick and Offord there, and then it's kind of filled out with, I don't know, like a John Butcher, a Brian Healy before he went to Cliftonville, kind of players like that, where you're thinking this is not a Linfield player starting of old, but you're packing it in with players like that. Would that be an odd move?
It's a nice idea.
It would be an odd move. Sorry.
Is that just football manager nonsense?
It would be a great idea if we were able to trust those who are recruiting the players currently to do that. But I wouldn't trust them to go to the shop and get me the right milk.
Linfield's where young players come to die. Like, can you imagine a John Butcher going through a tough spell, doesn't score for five or six? He'd beaten alive by that crowd. There's not one redeeming quality of wanting to come to Linfield at this point. You come and you get stick for 90 minutes, and then you're not being coached particularly well by the look of things. So that what you're talking about is almost what's been happening, only it's been no marks from England that have come from someone's contact book, and none of them seem to have worked. And to be fair, not massively given a chance. This year, your Sam Taylors, your Matt Yates, but then when they have come in, they haven't. the flatter to deceive.
I tell you, it's the wrong way to look at this. But if, for example, Walsh, McKee, and Allen all go next year to another Irish League club, if they flourish, it'll be a massive indictment, unfortunately, on the Blues. And it might be exactly what you're talking about, is that it's just not a place that, either from an atmosphere at Windsor Park or just the absolute pressure that comes with Linfield, is that it's not a place that is intuitive for young players.
There's actually only one of those players who I could firmly say I know their best position, and that's David Walsh because he's a goalkeeper. I don't know where's Charlie Allen's best position. Where's he proved himself? Where's Chris McKee's best position? Where's he proved himself? That's where we're at. We have players that can fill 10 roles in a 6 out of 10, but can never be a 9 out of 10. That's where we're at for young players at the minute who are at the Blues, to be honest.
That list of players he's recruited, you go down it
Please don't.
and you think, oh yeah, they left and they've made good careers of themselves, but it's at lower teams like Joe Crow playing well for Carrick now, probably because that's his level. You know what I mean? I'll pick another one. Daniel Kearns playing well now for the Welders, went to Cliftonville, probably his level. So the recruitment's wrong in that they're picking players that are more mid table teams, lower teams, and that's why it looks like, oh, they've went and flourished outside of Linfield. And it's like, well, they probably just weren't good enough.
Yes, but the return of that is that if we look at what Lauren particularly is building their success on this season, it's because they went out and got, and by all accounts, it was a pretty penny for Benji McGee, and you might not say he's really lived up to potentially a six-figure sum, but Benji McGee, Tiernan O'Connor, when you expected him to come out and do bits. You may have said a few years ago Linfield could have got Sean Graham as their left back to sit and let him flourish on that side. Like, there is going to be a part of you're going to have to try and find, because if you had Tiernan O'Connor as one of your another strikers, you'd be feeling a lot better. And actually, as much as he's not starting week in and week out, Benji McGee's a difference maker.
Yeah.
But maybe that's where you're talking about Linfield. Are they in a situation where they can financially take that gamble because their fingers are burnt from Morrison?
From that same list, the last difference maker that we had was Ethan Devine, who had his purple patch at the end of one season and virtually handed us a league title. That's our last difference maker, because we have players like Fitzpatrick who start every game, but when you look at a Linfield bench at the moment, there's just there's nobody who turns a game around for you. We had a game turned around there against Ballymena 2 weeks ago because of an absolute calamity of an own goal. That's the only reason we end up not drawn against the bottom half Ballymena side at home. That's where we're at the minute. And I just, you're talking about difference makers for other clubs. The Ballymena subs that were coming on against us in the League Cup semi-final, I was going, flip, he could do something. That's where I'm at the minute. I'm jealous of Ballymena.
You know, I'm now thinking about the players that actually Linfield have tried to do that young Irish League prospect, and I think the jury's out a bit on Isaac Bird at the minute, but Allet, McKay, McBrien, different reasons here, injuries and all that type of stuff as well mixed in, but none of them have yet to flourish totally to say, oh, they should be back in that Linfield team. But that pot hasn't particularly come true either.
And then we also had Matthew Shevlin on the books and was basically never really used him, and he's been one of the best strikers in the league for the past, let's say, 4 years. That's what happens sometimes at Linfield. It's so difficult to explain.
Yeah, but for every Shevlin, I don't want to throw this guy, into traffic here, but Lorcan Ford was also a high prospect, came in, and he isn't a top flight player just at the minute, so it's hard. You can't hang on to every player just in case they become Shevlin, or that older experienced player could still all of a sudden turn out to be Sturt again, the way he's playing for Glentoran this season. So I think that's maybe the biggest deep dive we've had on a club ever on this podcast, but we had 2 years for a reason. You're putting numbers on it. How if you had to predict and take off the glasses of just total despair that I feel like you all have on. How do you see this season ending? Do you think you can still get Europe? Because look, it's a bad run of form, but Carrick won a bad run of form, and look at them now.
Carrick's Carrick, and Carrick are allowed to have a bad run of form. Linfield aren't allowed to have a bad run of form. That's basically it. We're currently sitting fourth position with 46 points after 25 games. Um, Dungannon coming on Tuesday night. Don't fancy that at all. Not one bit do I fancy Dungannon coming up and playing at Windsor. Um, you're looking at a case where we need to hope that whoever is above us wins the Irish Cup in order for them to get the European place and for us to be the quote unquote best team in the playoff. At the minute, you're looking at Linfield, Dungannon, Carrick, Cliftonville. Somehow, I think we do that. There's something in me that says we'll get Europe by the skin of our teeth, and somehow salvage that out of a season of utter despair. We'll lose the League Cup final, but we'll somehow win that playoff.
It's funny, you look now at the three above you, and I don't think you're catching Larne or Corian. I think you can catch. You got 2 games in hand. You can do it, but I don't see it. I think Corian look like they're maybe going to go on a bit of a tear here. Glentoran feels similar. They've got a game in hand on you and are 3 points ahead. Obviously, that can be turned around. It feels like Linfield are going to finish fourth this year, which means they're going to have to go through a playoff no matter what, because they're not going to win the Irish Cup. The real disaster and the real drama could be if of those 3 teams above them, one of them doesn't win the Irish Cup.
If one of them doesn't win the Irish Cup, and then Glentoran win the League Cup, going straight into the final of that European playoff, and I wouldn't back Linfield to beat Glentoran with a 1-goal head start at this point.
Like you are hoping one of Lauren, Corian, or Glentoran win. You always want to take over Glentoran and finish third, but you're hoping now one of them win the Irish Cup, because if Limavady win it.
If Limavady win it, I'll come back on here at the end of the season. I'll apologise to David Healy. They're a great side, but I can't see that happening.
But you know what I mean. You know what I mean. If it's a situation where, like last year, where Dungannon got that European place, it just makes that whole situation for Europe, and we all know a lot's riding on it. So, if the last couple of weeks and months hasn't been a wake up call for that squad, you've got to admit Friday night will be that, and the outburst from fans will be that, and it's this whole mix up as well with all the fans boycotting the game. It really feels like, from a morale point of view, everything in South Belfast and beyond feels like it's in the pits. Let's give Limavady credit. They dug in. What a performance from Stephen Laurie in particular. Both Laurie brothers did play their part to perfection. McNichol took his chance when he grabbed it. You had the penalty. It goes off the upright. You both had chances where then Limavady hit the upright kind of late on as well. And like it is hard to break down a team who are, whatever it is, 9, 10, 11 men behind the ball. But when it gets to that, you feel like, well, Linfield aren't going to break that down. Let's give kudos to Limavady. Yes, they were the team that were playing the quote-unquote home fixture, but once they got the goal, they played it to perfection. A lot of heart.
They're a good team as well. They'll probably win that championship and come up. It's almost equivalent to your Bangor beating the Glens last year, but a bit worse, I think. Yeah, they played well. Just on the boycott, I think it's proved the boycott to be successful, in that this is the effect when you don't have fans there. If you want to take that angle at it, I think the bigger angle is just that Linfield were rubbish. So I don't know how much the boycott actually played into it. But yeah, fair play to Limavady, more than deserving winners. It's not as if it was a smash and grab. It was they were the far better team, and what can you do?
I think I'm of an opinion that Linfield could have brought 50,000 up the road on Friday night, and that wouldn't have changed anything. That's how bad they were. As Ross has already said, credit to Limavady, who dug in, put in a performance that they needed to do. It was actually a pretty great blueprint of how a championship team should play against a higher team. Take your chance when it comes, be dogged, be smart, and just absolutely snuff out the opposition attack. I think it was a really, really good blueprint for that.
Just on the fans thing, do you see the Windsor malaise going into overdrive now? Like, it feels like it's been popping up online quite a lot of just how empty Windsor Park is feeling. Do you see that continuing, where you could get to an even poorer level than you're at now with fan attendance?
On that, I would then pose the question to you: what would actually entice someone to go to Windsor Park and watch Linfield play football at the minute? It's it's an 18,000, well, what, 16, 17,000 seater stadium with 1,600 people in it at the minute.
And a bad pitch.
I'm getting on to that. I've got enough points here. I don't have enough fingers for the points here. The pitch is a ploughed field, and we actually tried doing this thing called passing, against Ballymena, on a corner of that ploughed field, and it actually looked quite good for all of 3 seconds. The stadium, you hear all this guff about West Ham in the big Olympic Stadium, and it's all about match day experience. There is no match day experience at Linfield, and it is, for me at the minute, it is a social occasion to see my friends, and the football has turned into sort of like a sideline that interrupts our conversation. That's how bad it's at the minute. There's no joy in going to Windsor Park to watch a football game anymore, and I can see that attendance dropping rather rapidly before things get any better.
How much does Roscoe leaving add a bit of salt to the wound of this season?
Well, do you want to put it this way? Would you rather go to Texas or go to Windsor Park?
Yeah. I
See, there we go.
I look, this is my opinion. I would like David to, he's been in and out of the team. Strap the rocket to Sam Taylor. Build your team around him. I know he's not your player, he's on loan, but just, he actually looks like someone. It's on and off. He's flaky, he's young, I get that. But like, at least he can swing a ball in and move up and down that side. Like, anyway. He seems to be the one player where he's on the ball I kind of like. But yes, well done, Limavady. You're through. You're likely to be playing Linfield next season based on your form this year in the league. So yes, congratulations. That is our banger result against Glentoran this season. As I said, predicted last week. If you didn't listen to last week, I think I even gave McNichol as the man who's going to score the goal. But yeah, I think we've covered the situation with Linfield there. We'll look back at what was quite an entertaining weekend of football. It didn't include Glentoran, Drummond because weather. This is getting tiresome. But then even the League of Ireland, which started this weekend, they some of their games called off because of weather. So
Summer football, boys.
yeah,
Summer
yeah, yeah.
football.
Well, we could be finishing our season at this time, couldn't we? If we have the dream of May until February. So, yeah, that's something to think about. But games elsewhere, like, it doesn't completely absolve the past few weeks. But Cliftonville, when you need a superhero, Johnny Addis is the man that wears the cape. What a strike! Down to 10 men, gutting for Glenavon. But in a weekend now, and we'll talk about the changes at board level for Cliftonville. Oh, if you are a Reds fan in that stadium, that is just a huge moment and a further cementing of the legacy, the legendary legacy of Addis and Cliftonville.
Yeah, it's just been an absolute. Who would have predicted that when he actually signed for Cliftonville, there would be a supporters club named after him? That's the level of how good this guy has been. Really, it's fairly impossible to say how much of an almost legend this guy's become. A centre half scoring that goal in the 95th minute to put you through, and in what has been an absolutely terrible season for them, it is just fantastic. And listen, this is what Cliftonville needed. Let's be honest. Cliftonville's league season is virtually the same as Linfield. It's relying on a European playoff, so you've got to then have some joy in the cup to sort of keep you going through that. You're gonna have to enjoy one weekend in your month. So listen, fair play to them. Glenavon, their eyes are obviously on avoiding that drop and coming up with some sort of great escape. But listen, Cliftonville did the job. Avoided extra time, I think, which is obvious. Well, obviously did avoid extra time. I think that really suits them as well going into this week's league game.
Brutal way where you're seeing these little moments of light for Glenavon. They go 1-0 up away from home against Cliftonville. It gets pegged back, but then Cliftonville are the team who go down to 10 men. I know it's not been there a year, but you got to go on and finish the job, surely.
Glenavon fans not happy on the forums. A lot of people saying the way they managed the game after the sending off, they didn't have a shot on target, and that's kind of summed them up this year. Like they've had the carrot dangled in front of them, but not had too many bites of it yet. So that'll be a disappointing one because obviously, as Mark's saying there, the cup kind of can be your outlet for happiness throughout the season, and now Glenavon are just sort of staring right down the barrel of a miserable end of the season because I can't see them pulling themselves out of it. It's just too far away. But yeah, that's a disappointing one for them. On Johnny Addis, what a player! I think he only scores Raspers. There's one at Newry a few seasons ago where he got them out of a bit of trouble. So fair play to him. Everybody loves him for a reason, I suppose.
It'll be some montage when he eventually decides that his playing career is over, but we're not there just yet. This adds to a really joyous, potentially, weekend for Cliftonville after the darkness of the past few. It was announced there on Twitter on Saturday evening that Cliftonville Football Club confirms the resignation of Chairman Kieran Harding, Facilities Director Adrian Keenan, and Director David Begley from the Management Committee. Usually you don't go, this is a positive thing. It may not be, but if you hear any chatter in regards to the TIG potential investment of Cliftonville, there was a feeling that perhaps if there was a change at the top, and these three people may be just that actually maybe the investment from TIG might be a thing. So it's not guaranteed, but if you're a Cliftonville fan, you're thinking, fingers crossed, does this mean there's a chance it could be back on?
Well, they basically came out in their statement, TIG, and said that they couldn't work with the current regime. So maybe this does come back into the picture, but it's a tricky one because you are just left with that unknown. And is it better the devil you know? But from listening to Cliftonville fans, it seems absolutely not better with them.
Well, they're keen for the big change. We'll have to see if it comes. They then in the quarterfinals have been drawn against Loughgall, who defeated fellow championship side Institute. So they'll have to go down to Lakeview. That'll be a nice wee game because as much as Loughgall haven't been particularly all guns blazing in the championship, Cliftonville going down there, that could be on the right weekend a tough game for the Reds.
Tough game for any team going down to a championship team. And in the Irish Cup, it's really difficult to beat championship teams. Yeah, listen, I'll take the reins as our local Loughgall correspondent then. Really mixed bag for them in the championship this year, as you've already said. Top half. Had a really good result there recently against Diana, actually, which is something that wasn't expected at all. And two wins really within the space of 4 days in the Irish Cup. It is, well, there's not too many teams can say they've done that, but fair play. And I really wouldn't fancy Cliftonville massively in that game. Real tight wee pitch down there, as everybody knows, in a ground where Loughgall over the 2 years when they were in the Premiership sprung up a number of surprises for a number of top six teams. That night to beat Lauren especially, one of those fantastic fixtures for them. So isn't every chance that we're on for another shock.
They really should have enough, I think, Cliftonville to win that game, but they are fighting and scrapping for every single one of their wins, so we'll look forward to that in March. We've talked about how Limavady are through. They've got a home tie against the team who actually play at that ground, Coleraine. I wonder will they make Coleraine go to the away? Why don't we do that, lads, here? Away changing rooms, this is our home ground technically for today. And that's because Coleraine, after extra time, beat out Carrick. I thought that was going to be a very interesting game. 1-1 after your 90 minutes. Really frustrating from a Carrick point of view because they have been on form. That's a gift of a goal to give to Ben Wiley to give Coleraine the lead. They battled back. He is... I think if the month fell just a wee bit later and a wee bit longer. I think Lecky's your player of the month if you count like late January and on what we've seen in February so far. Another great goal from him. He's having a bit of a renaissance here for Carrick, but unfortunately it goes to extra time, and then Shevlin goes through the gears. 4-1 is how it ended, and Coleraine looking like one of the big favourites if they can get past Limavady to go all the way this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, Coleraine come through that game, get as you say, a nice, I say a nice draw against Limavady. It's no such thing. Um, but you're then also looking at, you know, when unfortunately that this is going to be the case, when Glentoran beat Drummond Mills, it's going to be a straight shootout between the winner of Lauren Glentoran and Coleraine for your big favourites for the Irish Cup. So Coleraine could be in an Irish Cup final and only having, you know, a Lauren or a Glentoran stopping them. That's what we're looking at the minute. Um, and again, Shevlin proves why he's one of the hottest strikers in this league. Coming up when it really matters, scoring early on in that extra time to sort of knock the stuffing out of Carrick, and then just continuing to do what he's done over the past 4 or 5 years. An excellent player who, on his day, is probably the best striker in the league.
A really nice tie that. As we said, Glentoran, Drummond they will play the winner of that will go up against Larne after they take care of business against Warmpoint away from home. And it's the players who we were only highlighting, let's say, half an hour ago or so, in the likes of Lusty and O'Connor. Investments are really coming to the fore for them, and you might not say they're absolute league leading players, but just in their system, their physicality, this is what Linfield 20 years ago looked like. Just never in doubt.
Yeah, there was a bit of chat on Radio Ulster about was this a potential shock watch, and then the score after 5 minutes, and they say you just get back down in your place, and we're just going to take it from here. Just Lauren flat track bullies when they want to be with the lower teams, and they'll be eyeing this up as a getting the monkey off the back and finally getting that Irish Cup win because, as you said, it's a straight shootout between those three teams. Realistically, I don't think Rodney McRae would be too happy with saying that, but I think realistically it is those three teams coming.
Yeah, well, the holders, and they still are, Dungannon are still in the hat after beating Portadown at Shamrock Park. Another in a long list of poor results for Portadown. They take the lead thanks to an absolute thunderous shot from Shane McCartan. It looks like they've really missed him this year, but Dungannon fight back. A very similar goal then scored by a familiar foe for Portadown, Sean McAllister, and then it's another howler from a set piece when it comes to a Portadown perspective, but a nice little touch from Andy Mitchell, not really hassled by the defender, looping it over Alex Moore in the Portadown goal. 2-1, and as much as Portadown had a few chances late on, Dungannon stood firm and are in the next round into the quarterfinals. Neither of these two teams are doing great checks in the league, and in the end, it's the big moments that matter. And look, they're struggling up top, Dungannon, and they're struggling for form, but it's those little moments from a player like Andy Mitchell and Sean McAllister they needed today, and it really did them in good stead.
Get another teeth job for Dungannon because I've seen that miss from McKinnon very late on. Like that is we say how good it was for Dungannon to win that Irish Cup last year, but if you're gonna go on a cup run and do it again, you're gonna have to get away with wee moments like that. So you never actually quite know what's gonna happen on a cup run, obviously. But Dungannon, they were the dark horse last year, dark horse this year, absolutely potential for that one. As we say, the league's the league. It's not happening for them. They're never gonna. Well, are they gonna win the Irish League? Definitely not. Let's be quite honest. But we'll settle on that. But for them, a good run in the Irish Cup, a semi-final. Who says that they're not going to throw up a bit of a spanner in the works?
It's tough for Dungannon because the results haven't been great on the pitch. And I got a wee eye on them on Saturday, and you can just tell, one, the struggle on grass pitches. I think that's clear at the minute, but also defensively it's always been a weakness. You had this really dynamic midfield which had Bigorama, Alves and co. Alves is out. I think they really miss him as someone that can move with the ball. Bigorama's lost a bit of a step. You then look up top, and as much as Junior wasn't the the same player that they had maybe at the start of his run, him moving on. That's going to be a strange area. Moore, who they've taken on from Larne, looks tall. I can see why he wouldn't get into the Larne side, but kind of ran quite well. I can see him probably grabbing somewhere between 5 or 6 goals, let's say, between now and the end of the season. He needs to get a bit more game time, but could fit in there nicely. But outside of that, they are just, and it's difficult, right? McAllister's a nice addition, but they just don't seem to be the same team that they were last year in particular, but maybe even a couple of months ago. And when you're a team like Dungannon, that's hard because you need your big players to step up. And on Saturday in a cup tie, they did.
Yeah, there was always going to be a little bit of regression from last year. I think that they've obviously outperformed expectations, and they have shrunken back. Maybe the bad run at the start of the season was a bit of a hint as to what could happen, but they've done more than enough at this stage where I think they're comfortable in the top six again. They'll get their European playoff, and once they get there, they showed last year that they can do a bit of knockout football. So it'll be just about keeping them ticking over until they get into that big couple of games at the end of the year.
A change of formation up from Niall Curry in this game, where there was like a diamond, four at the back, diamond in midfield, and then it was Fife and somebody else up top there. So it was kind of like a weird 4-4-2. The players didn't seem to really click with it at the start, and then they kind of found a bit more of their rhythm later on. Maybe McCartan kind of a 10 attack. They have struggled outside of the goals from even Fife. They have really been lacking a striker. It's been a tough couple of weeks. Niall's starting to talk about rumours about his position in the press. Do you think that's fair, Mark?
I don't think, again, we're talking about, I was talking about people earlier who maybe haven't deserved a sort of contract extension. Has Curry done enough to prove that he's the man to take Portadown forward? Hasn't had a win since Boxing Day in the league, out of the Irish Cup at the second time of asking. Is that enough for Portadown?
You're not allowed to say things like this, Mark.
What, the truth?
Stop
Sorry,
bringing
they'll
this
all
up.
be against me. They'll all be against me.
I fear for your
Saint
DMs.
Niall is untouchable. Listen, the guy's Mr. Portadown, without doubt. But has he done enough to secure, another X amount of pound or whatever he's going to get for transfers? Has he done enough to get, is our Portadown?
Well, has there not been, when you look at investment in the team,
There's been enough.
Scott comes in, that Wiley moves on, and clearly that they're lacking his creativity in midfield. But Scott, Carson, and then Adam Toe is now got a first start for the club there on Saturday. I'll say this now. Somebody came up to me at the ground and said to me, I would just like to put the record straight with you, Peter. And I go, yes. I'm thinking, Ross Welsh is getting me in trouble again with people at Portadown. And he said, I would like to clarify that you are not, in fact, Adam Toe's parent, because I am his dad.
There we go. There we
So
go.
we had a good laugh about that.
Good.
Didn't expect things I say on this podcast and Twitter to bite me back, but no, that was very funny. So yes, so we go back to that. There has been investment brought in, players come in there. So if you're looking at it from a board point of view, all signs are he's our man, is it not?
But is
The back
what I'm saying is ninth position where Portadown need to be in this league to take it on to the next step, or are we, are they just sort of stalling at the minute? That's what I'm trying to ask and get across.
Without investment, are they able to push on, or should a team like Portadown look at Bangor and Dungannon and think they should be achieving better than them?
I think they have to be.
Like, they are perpetuating the second season syndrome stereotype.
I'm just of the opinion of they need to be looking at being the best part-time club in the league. That's where Portadown need to be, with the pool of the amount of fans that are in that area, the backing of, as I've said, financially they're backed. That's good to go. That he's been backed. So where do you draw the line at this is good enough or this isn't good enough? They need to be the best part-time team in the league for them to be, continually progressing on and on. I'm not saying that that's going to happen straight away, but I'm saying that needs to be where they need to be looking at, in my opinion, because it's achievable.
All jokes aside, they're probably not going to come 12th now, as I predicted. But the reaction of Portadown fans at the time was, that's ludicrous. We're going to be pushing for Europe. Like, we're going to be pushing for at least playoffs. But now the tone seems to have really changed, where ninth does seem to be good enough. But
I think they would probably shake
there
her half to
has
10th, would they not?
Yeah, sure.
yeah, there has to be a degree of, Ballymena are 3 points behind them, and Crusaders are four behind them. They've a game in hand on Crusaders, but that changes very quickly, and you don't want to be 4 points above the relegation playoff going into the split. So I think they've flown under the radar a little bit of underachieving this year, and that there's still time for that to go quite wrong.
Well, it's interesting watching that game because I haven't really watched a lot of Portadown this year. I was really bigging up McKinnon and Alton Top last year. I don't think there's a bigger fall off than those two together. They've conceded 45 goals in the league. And they're conceding so many from set pieces. Like, it feels that you go through highlights, that Carrick game and other ones, they're really being caught from an organisational point of view. When you're there talking to some of the fans, there's some who really back him and really feel as though he's brought them back up and he's bringing in players. And then you feel the division, you chat to other people that there's frustration. Earlier on in the season, there was maybe one or two other managers, you might look at Owen Kearney and stuff on the market. For example, and this is a lot of the talk, if and they've got a few games to go here. Portadown, you look at them, yeah, they're within 4 points of Crews and 11th, and that could be really, really grim. But you get two wins, and they've got some tough games coming up, and they're on 34, and they're likely to be in a good position where they only need to get one or two results in the split, and they have some really good players there. But there doesn't seem to me that there's any real candidate out there that's breathing down the neck.
No, they've almost missed the boat. In a regard, that there was a point where there was big rumours that he was going to go, and then it ended up that it was just his coaching staff had left, and there was options at that point, and now they were in a better outlook at that time, but now it seems like they have missed the boat. And who do you get in? Because sort of your big names that would traditionally have been linked with jobs, Stuart Kings, Gary Hamiltons, they're tied up now. So they've almost backed themselves into a corner at Portadown where they have to stick with Niall Curry as their man now. So as you say, they've really snuck up on Bangor all of a sudden, and a couple of wins. It's that tight, it does sort of pull you away out of trouble, but it's all sort of teetering at the minute.
Let's see their next fixtures here: Coleraine away, Larne at home, Cliftonville at home, Dungannon at home, and then Glenavon away. So home is pretty much, I don't know what their record is compared to Linfield, but I can't really recall many big wins for them away this season. So look, it's a team in a bad run, but look again, Carrick were on that bad run, and now I think they're looking really solid to steal a top 6 place. The only other result we haven't talked about, you were there, Hardenmouth Welders and that man Gary Hamilton playing. That's exciting.
Started himself up front.
Unreal.
It turned out anything but exciting. Certainly not dynamic. Yeah, strange decision. Bit of fun, but it was like they were playing with 10 men. To be honest, he's and that's nothing against him. He's just old. You know what I mean? He's old and he hasn't played a lot of football in a long time. Strange decision because there was strikers on the bench. I don't know, but they held their own until half time, 0-0, very competitive. 3-0 flatters the Welders. Once they got one, I feel like that was always going to happen. But a decent game, and I do like getting down to Tilliesburn. So
from then there, we can go through the entire, we've kind of referenced it here, lineup of the quarterfinals being played on the weekend of the 6th and 7th of March. Swifts host the Welders. I think home advantage there is vital for the Swifts to make that maybe a bit more easier than you would expect. Likely to be Glentoran against Larne. I mean, pencil that for Friday right now. Limavady against Coleraine, and Loughgall against Cliftonville. If you're just going to go bookie favourites, you're looking at Cliftonville, Coleraine. You can go Larner, Glentoran, whatever, and the Swifts. That would be an interesting lineup there for the semi-finals. Of course, Drummond S, Welders, Limavady, and Loughgall will be fun too.
Yeah, it's also impossible. It's what we're probably going to be looking at in the last stages of this. There's often a team that's sort of like a sort of wee bogey team. There was the year that Lurgan Celtic got to the semi-final of the Irish Cup and all this jazz. We're looking at two of the part-time teams are playing potentially two of the full-time teams, and that's where the full-time teams are pulling away. They're nearly guaranteed a semi-final of the Irish Cup if they have a half decent. You win 3 games, you're in an Irish Cup final. That's just be sorry, 3 games you're in an Irish Cup semi-final. So that's how easy it is for these teams, just to tick off. If you're a decent enough team, you're just ticking off these games, no problems, no questions asked, until you meet your sort of big boy opponent, and then things start getting tasty. So I mean, could we have a repeat of last year's Irish Cup final in Dungannon Cliftonville again? That'll be fantastic. Coleraine Glens or Coleraine Larne potentially in the final of the Irish Cup. Absolute sickener for me, but like, what a day out that'll be for those fans. If
A Larne Coleraine final, you'd be jumping up and down, wouldn't you? In despair, but also happiness.
Yeah, it's sort of like, yeah, that's I don't really know what to say anymore about like how bad this, like, the only team that whoever's above us just needs to win the Irish Cup. That's the long and short of it. That's all I really want.
So we look ahead to a week of games here. Oh wait, sorry. Final January transfer window chat. We can squeeze it in, drag it out. The subscribers love it. I think the one that really nipped in last minute, Josh Daniels to the Glens and Sule to Ballymena. Oh, and also Cliftonville have got Adam Carroll. Yeah, Adam Carroll has been about there in the championship for a while, scored a number of goals. I think he feels like a squad player with the chance of development. I think that's a nice player where they're struggling to get bodies up for Cliftonville with decent potential there. Josh Daniels, constant talk about him going to the Glens. Probably the type of player they need. It could be it could be Dara Connor 2.0, but they probably take that right now.
I think they're crying out for a wide man. Hooban, personally, I don't think gives you much outside of goals, which is obviously his whole job. So fair enough. But if they can start pumping balls into him a bit more frequently, then I think they could be on a bit of a winner. Maybe not this year. I think it's too late this year, but going into next year, that could be the bane of my existence for a wee while.
I quite like it, Mark. Why not? Been there, done that with TNS. Knows the Irish League as well. Exactly the type of position they need. He'll have to come up and prove it, but I think he will.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's a really sensible signing. A player wants to move back to Northern Ireland. Wants a wage at a full-time club. So the full-time club that need the winger cough up the money for him and release their other winger, and Christy Pattinson, who was really not really in favour at the Oval. Let's be quite honest. A player who had sort of ebbs and flows of decent games and then just really, really poor games. So they're signing a proven player in the Irish League who's gone across the water and proved himself, made a career and wanting to come home. It's a no-brainer, and the Glens have made the right decision and just coughed up the money and signed the player, and he will succeed. I've almost no doubt in that because of the quality of the player he is.
Josh Kelly beefs up the Cliftonville midfield on loan. I mean, that was a player who you kind of thought was going to leave the Glens maybe during the summer, but became actually a rotational piece for Divine, but he's going to spend the rest of the season being this kind of blocker in midfield for the Reds. Totally makes sense because they are just lacking experience and bodies there. And then there's a chance, probably isn't absolutely tippy-top, biggest deal of the transfer window, but I think we'll all remember this. Sule to Ballymena.
I'm going to be quite honest. Did you know anything? Did anybody know anything about it until it was done? It was the most random last minute transfer ever. It was, as we were talking about earlier, really, really football manager move. just straight out of nowhere.
But if you're looking at a plug and play centre midfield player who can do defensive work, and we can talk about maybe does the way he carry the ball and particularly like for absolutely top end players, can he impact the way you build up in not a positive way? We can park that. But for someone that can really bring that energy to midfield, I mean that's the man. And I doubt is coming on a discount.
You're getting a proven Irish League winning midfielder to sign for Ballymena United. That's it's a no-brainer. It's a back
At
post,
29,
yeah, a back post tapping is what it is. For Ballymena, if you're offered that guy and you can afford him, you're going for it. And fair play to them for taking the punt on him because the guy was an absolute menace to play against in so many games. I think I only ever saw him get outplayed by Linfield once, which was when Shane Lavery stood on him basically the whole game. That was the only time we were able to nullify him in an Irish. I think it was a league game. Sorry, near the end of the 21 season, 22 season maybe. That was the only time I saw him ever get played out of a game. He always finds a way to do what he wants to do, and he will bully and force you into playing his game by his rules, and he will win Ballymena points this season, no problem.
I think he will as well. I think that look, they've brought in a lot of players that need to find their foot in there, but I think he could just really be the difference maker to just get those points that they need to get out of this drama at the bottom of the table. Is it going to push them totally above and steal a top six place? Unlikely, but look, everything's on the table point wise.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Ballymena, they're sort of building towards next year. Um, a bit of a caveat if they're still in the league. I don't think that's a certainty yet, but you don't know. So if they stay in the league, which I think they probably will, I think they're all sort of building towards everyone's knitting together now and have a bit of a better go at it next year.
Big week ahead because we have Tuesday night games. We have a big run on Saturday here. We can kind of breeze through how we think this will set things up for the weekend's games. Ballymena Cruise, that's significant near the bottom of the table.
Yeah, I think what we've just said there about the signing of Fod Sula might be a wee difference maker there for Ballymena. I just don't see where the Crews are fixing problems and beating teams above them. The last
But they've
time,
been decent against some of the better teams.
okay, okay, against some of them. I can't. I'm not going to paint the pretty picture for Seaview. Like they're lucky that Glenavon are below them at the minute. Because if it wasn't for Glenavon in this league, I don't know what would be saying about Crusaders. I've seen Crusaders play well once this season, and it was against Glenavon when they absolutely thumped them. Without Fraser Bryden, I don't know where the rest of their season lies. I think we're talking about a team who totally relied on one player for, let's say, what, 50% of their goals, and he's totally done himself in. So, if you've an answer for me as to where the Crews are getting their goals from for the rest of the season, I'd be happy to hear it. But I think Ballymena do it, no problem, 2-0, no questions asked.
I think that might be 0-0, but both teams obviously fresh off the back of not playing any games in the cup.
Yeah, I'll go for a low scoring draw as well. Just I don't think Crusaders, as Mark says, don't have the firepower, but then I don't think Ballymena particularly have it either. I think Success Itigan's too hot and cold. You can easily just not score in a game, so I'm going to low scoring draw there, probably 1-1.
Carrick Glenavon, big game for Glenavon there on Saturday. Carrick obviously fall apart a wee bit in extra time. I still think with that's Taylor's Avenue, Carrick should win that. Cliftonville Bangor could go either way. I think that might be a draw. Coleraine, probably just the way they're going, should beat out Portadown, and if it's kind of another drubbing, that just adds a bit more to the fire, unfortunately, there in mid-Ulster. Long Glentoran, the big game on TV, then Linfield Dungannon. I think Dungannon aren't playing pretty great here, and Linfield should win that, but by a small margin. Larne, anything stands out there from that? I mean, it's a pretty big game between Glentoran and Larne in regards to the season still having some sort of what if.
I think it was, as you said a couple of weeks ago on Twitter, that we were all sort of rooting for the Glens in the last time they played, and then Lauren went out and thumped them. So, for any chance of this league actually not being a procession for Lauren, we need the Glens to win. Can't believe I'm saying that, but that's where we're at.
Do you think they will?
No, they'll lose. No, not at Denver. Definitely not.
I think this could be another just tetchy first half,
Not at Edinburgh.
draw, 0-0, 1-1. The Swifts host Cliftonville in a bit of a mid-table battle here on TV on Friday night. Again, I just think this is going to be a very close and trudging encounter.
Yeah, two teams, as we say, in the middle of the table there, who have had nothing but trudging encounters recently. Repeated that old Irish Cup final again last year.
Yeah.
As it was,
And the one that you hope's happening this year as well.
no. I think two teams in a very, very level playing field, to be honest. Dungannon, who can't seem to score, Cliftonville, who can't seem to score either. I'll go all low score draw as well.
I fancy Dungannon. I think on their home turf, I fancy Dungannon there. I just think Cliftonville just don't turn up too frequently, so I just give this one to the Swifts.
I can see that. And they're a bad mix for Cliftonville sometimes. We see a repeat there then on Saturday between the two teams that faced off at Taylor's Avenue this Saturday. Carrick against Coleraine. You know, I think this might be a similar result actually. I think Coleraine could win again. They
Can't
should have
dis-
the energy.
yeah, I can't disagree with you, to be honest. I think they're fairly, Irish Cup games I often find are a lot more tight and a bit more tetchy. As Ross and I did find out, Carrick is a very, very tough place to go. So it'll not be a walk in the park for Coleraine, but I think they should have it in them. Going forward, 2-0 I'm going to go for.
Yeah, I think Carrick will have put more focus and emphasis onto the cup game. I think Coleraine, they won't find it easy, but they'll find it easier. Yeah, 2 or 3 nil.
Right. Somebody say something positive about the Cruise because the fans are just constantly at me. Cruise, host Bangor. See if you at the special advantage, no?
Not for Bangor. Um, Bangor's size of pitch, all that jazz, is fairly similar to the Cruise, and I think that as has been proved this season, Bangor know how to win on that wee small plastic pitch and how to get a result out. And as I said earlier, I don't know where the Cruise are scoring. So I'm gonna go for a really, really interesting 0-0 in that game.
I think Bangor will squeeze through,
Yeah,
Ross. I think they will get
I
2-0.
agree. I think they'll win 1-0.
Oh, Cruise fans, I'm
Well,
sorry.
here have this, Cruise fans. Your burger van's fantastic. I really like it. So
Oh, that'll really
That
cheer
is the
them up.
most.
so there you go. You know,
Yeah,
if you
get
can't
them
get
for it,
behind
man.
that, I don't know. There's nothing for you. But yeah, you'll be crying into your lovely cheesy chips after Ben Arthur scores a penalty, 1-0.
And in the week and a half where Jordan Owens retires, here comes his son. And don't come at me, Ben Arthur's dad, right? There's a son, Ben Arthur's going and maybe scoring against the Cruise. Glenavon Linfield, are we seeing a repeat of the shock, boys?
0-0. No joy or happiness in Lurgan again for Linfield.
Or for anybody?
No, well, where's the joy in Lurgan? There's none. Like, this is where we're at. They're getting relegated and Linfield are crap, so it's going to be 0-0, and there'll be about 50 people at it. That's what we're looking at right now. That's my honest truth, to be quite frank. So that's where I'm at with that game. Don't fancy it. Don't think we'll do much. So
The silver lining and blue men feel free to use this. Just voluntarily not go, and then make it out to the
Making a
missus. Oh,
statement.
I'm
yes,
sacrificing the Blues for Valentine's Day. Like, you don't want to go anyway. Just don't go. So you get brownie points, and each team will get 1 point because that will be a draw.
I think Linfield 2-0, goal for Fitzpatrick in either half. Glentoran against Ballymena, The Soule Revenge. Not particularly a great movie title, that, but I think if Glens are to be, this is a decent test for them in the sense that if they are to be a decent squad in this title division, like title fight, they need to beat Ballymena away from home. I'm sure it's going to be tricky, some good players, etc., but they just need to win out here. I think they will. 2-1.
PP game postponed due to water at the Oval.
Oh,
Is it at the Oval or is it at the Balmain Showgrounds?
it's at the
Because
Oval, which is another reason why.
it's not going to get played anywhere. We'll just never play this game. It'll be June when we're playing that game.
I thought you were anti-Surrey
Three.
football. Come on.
No, well, 3-1 Glens, sensibly. Size of the pitch, home advantage, Glens.
I'll go for a thumping for the Glens. I'll go 4-0 or something.
Oh,
really lay down a gauntlet. Um, would Sule play? When is the Indonesian season? I don't know what his fitness will be like. Come on, Mark, how do you know what?
sorry, I've been watching the Sri Lankan league more this year. Sorry,
Ah, you're
my
you're my
Indonesian.
Indonesian football
Yeah,
guy. Oh,
sorry,
that's
Only up.
not good.
sorry.
That makes him sound like a degenerate gambler, for goodness sake. Now, come on. Uh, talking about a thumping, are Lauren gonna dish that out at Shamrock Park? I think Lusty and O'Connor are gonna be such a bad matchup for that Portadown back line.
It's field day stuff for Lauren next Saturday. I think. It's as many as they want to nil. I'm gonna put a cap on three, but if Lauren want to score six, they'll score six next Saturday.
Took words out of my mouth. I was going to say field day. That's going to be playing with their food stuff. That could get ugly. And that's an already fractious Shamrock Park. So who knows? But yeah, that's going to be a wide margin win for Lauren.
Yeah, I think it'll be a 2 to 3 nil there. But yeah, we'll have to see. Another big podcast, another big week of football, and yeah, I know you guys know each other quite well, but a first podcast interaction between Ross Welsh and Mark McGuiggan, boys.
Yeah, sorry for all the editing you're gonna have to do and how long this podcast's gonna be. We won't get invited on this again. So it's been a pleasure, Ross. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Hopefully we never need to be on it again. Hopefully Linfield just win.
Together, yes, it was like a blue bat symbol going, guys, you know what we need to talk about, and we made it happen. So thanks for your contributions. We'll have to see if any big changes happen. Please kind of happen after this podcast because I don't want it to be out of date. Until next time, boys, have a good one.
All the best, sir. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Peter.
Thank you very much for listening once again. A new one, just having both Mark and Ross in the pod. I don't know if that's going to be listened to more in South Belfast and beyond, or maybe that might be the most listened to East Belfast pod of the year. We'll have to see. Really nice one there. I did a tweet there last week. A brilliant run, it must be said, for myself. I know it's kind of boring side of things, but really nice run to kick off 2026 for the podcast. Engagements through the roof. The consistency of engagements really, really brilliant. I mean, I've been doing this now. It's my fourth series. This is the fourth kind of post-January part of the season that I've done. And look, the podcast has grown year on year. And it's clearly thanks to you not only coming back, sharing, talking about it. I love chatting to people at games. Come say hello if you ever see me. It's wonderful, and it's also maybe a mini push from me to anybody else, because I'm trying to take this advice on myself. If you think you want to do something, do it. But you're going to have to keep doing it. Yeah, no matter what that is, you're going to have to keep doing it, because I am getting more in a day in this year, and hopefully it continues in this series, in Series 4, than I would have gotten a week in Series 1. That's genuine. So, you really don't know what's ahead of you. So I'm very, very thankful for that. And I hope you listen again. Thanks for listening to this one. If you're new here, hello. If you've been new here since 2026, hello. Hopefully it keeps on getting better and better and better. Subscribe, follow, you know where to go. Have a great week, guys. Bye-bye.